million the CEO, allergic to women for 30 years, until an intern walked in and stole his breath. They told him he'd never touch a woman without breaking into hives. That love, for him, was a condition he'd never survive. So he stopped trying, stopped feeling, until one rainy afternoon, a stranger with trembling hands and no umbrella barged into his life. Not with charm, but with chaos. She didn't know who he was, and he didn't know she was lying. All he knew was this: when she touched his skin, nothing hurt. There's a moment before a door opens that you swear you still have a choice. That's what Jinxie Carter told herself as she stood in front of the towering Whitaker Group building, ankle deep in a puddle, resume soaked, and fingers trembling not from nerves but from cold. She looked up at the glass skyscraper, its windows reflecting the cloudy Chicago sky like a mirror too honest to flatter anyone. She was here for a job. Well, not exactly. Technically, she wasn't even sure which floor the digital content department was on. The online listing had been vague, just a whisper of a hiring notice for a streaming host buried at the bottom of a message board. But it was all she had, and she pressed the elevator button. Behind her, a gust of wind caught her coat, nearly sending her backward. The doors opened. She stumbled inside, breathless, damp, and one accidental floor away from the moment that would change her entire life. 29 floors up, Graham Whitaker stood at the center of his glass-walled conference room, watching the clouds churn above Lake Michigan. He didn't believe in fate. He believed in numbers, in rules, in silence. He hadn't dated in decades. He didn't shake hands. He didn't hug. Touch was a trigger, a flame that set off everything inside him that still hadn't healed. The doctors called it a rare psychological allergy. He just called it survival. But his grandmother was dying, and she had one final wish: to see her grandson married before she passed. Graham had already declined every arranged introduction, every airworthy match curated by his board. He didn't want a wife. He didn't want warmth. He wanted quiet. But now he stood with a file in his hand, a desperate solution he hated himself for considering. A contract. Fake engagement. Just long enough to make Grandma smile, to buy her time. No intimacy, no complications. Just a body beside him. The elevator chimed. Jinxie stepped off too early on floor 29 instead of 21. Inside the glass hall, a man looked up. And she thought he was security. He thought she was number 6. The final candidate. "Miss Carter," someone called out before she could correct her mistake. "Why?" she said, out of breath, out of time. "Right this way. Mr. Whitaker is waiting." She walked, fast, heart pounding, confused but hopeful. Maybe this was the interview. She entered the room. Graham turned, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. He studied her like she was a blueprint. "Sit," he said, without looking up from the file in his hand. She did. "Somehow," he said, "let's begin." For 10 minutes, they danced a conversation built on the world's worst misunderstanding. She thought it was for a job in media. He thought she was here to pretend to be his girlfriend. Every time she said, I just want to come it, he thought she meant emotionally. Every time he asked if she could commit, she assumed he meant streaming schedules. Then he slid a contract across the table. She read the top line. Agreement for personal partnership. Duration. Agreement. Her face froze. "Ah. What exactly is this?" she asked. "You said you needed the money. I'm offering $50,000, 0 cents a month, plus housing. I assume you're willing to be by my side, discreetly, professionally, and occasionally in public." Her throat dried. "I came here to host a web series," she said slowly, "not be a paid girlfriend." He looked at her, finally really looked. "That wasn't made clear to you?" Olivia nodded. "Do you need the job?" "I need dignity." She stood up, grabbed her resume, and walked out. That night, the hospital called. Her mother's health insurance had collapsed. The surgery deposit had to be paid immediately. Jinxie stood in a hospital corridor, staring at the white walls that smelled like bleach and hopelessness. Her little sister was crying in a waiting room chair. She had $143, 0 cents in her checking account. And then her phone buzzed. If you change your mind, the offer still stands. $50K/month. One condition, you must be by my side. 24/7. Starting tomorrow. And she thought of her mom. She thought of her pride. And she whispered the worst truth of all. I don't have the luxury of pride. That night, Jinxie Carter didn't sleep. She went home, dusted off her sister's old suitcase, and opened a blank notebook. On the first page she wrote, "Fools, for falling into a lie. Don't look him in the eyes. Don't tell him who you really are. Don't fall for a man who can't touch you back." She turned off the light and prepared to become someone she wasn't. For the money, for the contract, for the man who didn't believe in love and didn't know that the girl about to walk through his door would soon become the only person in the world he couldn't live without. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Didn't Belong. The receptionist's smile was the kind that made you second-guess your existence. "Name?" she asked, eyes barely lifting from her monitor. "Jinxie Carter," Jinxie said, wringing her damp resume. "I'm here for the content host interview." The woman frowned, clicked something. "We don't have any digital interviews today. I called about it this morning. They said upstairs, floor 21. Then why are you on 29? Jinxie blinked. "I thought I hit?" Before she could finish, a different door opened down the hall. A man in a crisp navy suit stepped out, tablet in hand. "Number 6? The receptionist pointed at Jinxie. She turned. "Sorry, I think you've got the wrong—" "Right this way," the man said, not slowing down. "Mr. Whitaker's ready for you." She glanced back at the desk. The receptionist shrugged. "It's your name on the schedule." And that's how Jinxie Carter, broke, exhausted, and desperate, walked into the office of the most emotionally unavailable man in all of Chicago, thinking she was about to talk hashtags and product shots. The door closed with a hushed whisper. Graham Whitaker didn't look up. He was taller than she expected, lean, still, his profile razor-sharp as the skyline outside his glass walls. There was something impossibly precise about him. The dark brown suit, the silver tie, the way he held his pen like it weighed more than gold. She swallowed. "Hi, sorry about the—" "Sit," he said, not turning around. She sat. He scribbled something in the folder on his desk, then finally looked at her. Their eyes met. And for a second, just a second, something flickered in his gaze. Not interest. Not attraction. Clinical recognition, maybe. Then it was gone. "I'll be direct," he said. "I don't like wasting time." "Same," she replied before she could stop herself. One of his brows ticked upward. "Good." He flipped the file toward her. She scanned the header. Confidential engagement agreement. Term-based, personal partner. Her stomach dropped. "What is this?" "Your contract." She blinked. Excuse me? $50,000 a month, housing provided, staff clearance, media protection. In return, I require your presence, discreetly and occasionally in public as my partner." Jinxie's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I'm sorry, are you trying to hire me as your girlfriend?" "No, I'm hiring you as a solution. I came here for a job in social media." "This is not social media," he said calmly. "I noticed." Graham leaned back slightly, as if studying her confusion like a puzzle. "You're not number 6. "Ah. Then why are you here?" I hesitated. "I guess I hit the wrong button." He stared at her. And for a moment the silence between them was a living thing. Then he did something she didn't expect. He laughed, a single, breathless exhale. And just like that, the air in the room shifted. "You walked in by accident," he said slowly. and still made it farther than every vetted candidate I interviewed today. Jinxie didn't know whether to be flattered or horrified. I think I should go. You need the money. Her shoulders stiffened. I read desperation, he added. It's not an insult, just an observation. You read people like spreadsheets, huh? I read people the way I read risk. She stood. Well, here's a read for you. I'm not for sale. But before she could walk out, the door opened again. Patrick entered, breathless. Sir, your grandmother just called again. She's asking if the engagement photos will be ready by Thursday. Graham's jaw flexed. Tell her they're scheduled. Or not. I will be. Patrick glanced at Jinxie, eyes wide with curiosity. Should I schedule a fitting for the bride? Jinxie turned. Bride? Patrick froze. Oh, so she's not? No, Graham said quickly. She's not. The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Patrick backed out of the room. I'll circle back. When the door shut, Graham stood, slowly. You can go, he said. I was already going, she snapped. He looked at her one last time, then returned to his desk. Don't forget your resume. She reached for it. Their fingers brushed. Graham recoiled, just slightly. His hands trembled. She noticed. His face paled, but his voice was steady. Good day, Miss Carter. She walked out without looking back. And he stared after her long after the door had closed. That night, Jinxie sat at the edge of her mother's hospital bed, watching the machines blink. The nurse had just handed her a form, the deposit for the surgery. $80,000 minimum. She didn't have it. She had her phone, and she had a message, unread. He 50,000 flash month. No contact, no real relationship, just proximity. If you're interested, the offer remains. She should have deleted it. And she didn't. Hold on. The next morning, Jinxie showed up at the Whitaker group again. And same elevator, same floor. Patrick opened the door. He smiled, surprised. Number 6? Number 0, she said, lifting her chin. Number 0. He let her in. Graham was at his desk, as still as ever. He didn't look up. You're late. I wasn't invited. He looked at her then. Really looked. No makeup, hair tied back, her coat still damp from the rain. Why did you come back? My mother needs surgery. I need the money. He nodded. Under the record, she added, I'm only pretending to be the kind of girl who says yes to something like this. He replied quietly, am only pretending to be the kind of man who feels nothing. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a black folder. Welcome to the contract. Chapter 2, 50,000 Reasons to Lie. The first lie she told was that her name was Jinxie Carter. That was true. The lie came after. I don't mind pretending. The hospital smelled like wet laundry and time running out. Jinxie sat cross-legged on a molded plastic chair, watching her mother sleep, watching the clock, watching the nurse type out a bill no one in their family could afford. You okay? Anya whispered beside her. Jinxie exhaled slowly. Do I look okay? You look like you haven't slept in 3 days. That's accurate. The nurse approached, folder in hand. We're going to need confirmation on the deposit today, she said gently. By much? 78,000. But if you pay by tomorrow morning, we'll waive some of the pre-op fees. Right, Jinxie said. Sure. The nurse nodded and walked away. Anya turned to her. You could ask your sister. Jinxie didn't answer. Because that bridge had burned years ago, and it was still smoking. Later, on the Blue Line train rattling toward the city, Anya said it again. You don't have to do this. I do, Jinxie whispered. You don't even know what you're agreeing to. What if he's dangerous? He's allergic to perfume, Anya, and touch, and uneven numbers. The man flinched when our fingers brushed. It's Almost romantic? Jinxie snorted. No, it's clinical. So what's the plan? You sign a contract, smile for a few staged photos, play house with Mr. Neurotic? Exactly. But when he falls for you? Jinxie went quiet. Hey, Anya said. I know you. You have this thing where you try to save broken people. I'm not trying to save anyone, Jinxie said. I'm just trying to save my mom. Whitaker Tower looked different the second time. Not warmer, just familiar in the way hospitals become familiar after a few too many visits. Patrick greeted her with a nod and a pressed smile. We'll have a car bring you to the penthouse. The contract will be finalized there. But not here. Mr. Whitaker doesn't like making personal agreements in professional spaces. Jinxie raised a brow. This doesn't feel very personal. Patrick smiled, but didn't answer. The penthouse was white. White walls, white rugs, white air, if such a thing existed. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Jinxie stepped out of the elevator into stillness. Even her footsteps sounded too loud. Graham waited by the window, watching the city like it owed him something. You came, he said. You offered money, she replied. He turned, holding a leather folder. This is the agreement. She took it, flipped to the back. You already signed it? I don't waste time. She scammed. Non-disclosure clause. 0 physical intimacy unless pre-agreed. Public appearance schedule. Bi-weekly. Gin arrangements. Co-residence. Separate rooms. Duration. Subject to Grandma Ruth's health status. Her eyes narrowed. This last part. Contract may be extended or terminated based on medical necessity. Grandma's cardiologist says she has 6 months, maybe less. If she stabilizes, the contract ends. If she worsens, we extend. I am essentially an emotional pacemaker. His lips twitched. That's one way to put it. She paused. And the salary? 50,000. Wired on the 1st of each month. Bonus at conclusion. Jinxie tapped the final line. There's no section for my signature. Graham stepped closer and slid a pen across the counter. His hand stopped inches from hers. They both froze. He pulled back. Jinxie picked up the pen. Her hand trembled just slightly. And she signed. Jinxie Carter. You'll be moving in tonight, Graham said. Tonight? Grandma's birthday is Friday. She expects to meet you. Jinxie inhaled. And what do you expect? He studied her. You don't break anything, he said softly. Then he turned away. That night, Jinxie stood in the penthouse guest room with a suitcase she'd borrowed from Anya and a wardrobe that couldn't compete with the closet already stocked for her. Every item had tags. Every dress had been chosen by someone named Margaret, a stylist from New York who apparently curated fake fiancé aesthetics. Jinxie sat on the edge of the toupee bed, staring at a gold dress that probably cost more than her mom's entire medical bill. There was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Graham standing, stiffly, holding a binder. I thought you should know my schedule, he said, handing it over. It affects yours now. She took it. He stood there, like he wanted to say something else. Are you okay? She asked finally. He blinked. Why wouldn't I be? You look like someone who hasn't had a conversation in a long time. He hesitated, then said, quietly, I look like someone who made a deal with a stranger. That's not the same as being okay. Jinxie looked at him. And for a second, the air wasn't cold. It was just sad. Well, she said gently, here's to being two broken people who can pretend well enough to fool everyone else. He nodded once. Good night, Miss Carter. Good night, Mr. Whitaker. He turned to go, then paused. I'll have Patrick send over a key card and security code. And, I'm sorry. Why what? A word was spoken, and the girls told, Later, lying in the too-soft bed, Jinxie stared at the ceiling and whispered to no one. "Fall for him. For the man with ice in his eyes and fire beneath his skin. Fall for the way he never touches you, but always notices. And for the love of God, don't start hoping he'll ever be more than this contract." Chapter 3. The Rules of Being Touched. Setting: Graham Whitaker's penthouse next morning. Character: Jinxie Carter. Graham Whitaker. Patrick said. Grandma Ruth. Phone call. The alarm chimed at 6:00 a.m., soft, classical, and polite, like everything else in the Whitaker penthouse. Jinxie stared at the ceiling. This wasn't her bed. This wasn't her life. The silk sheets were too smooth, the mattress too expensive, and somewhere in the apartment, a fresh carafe of pour-overs coffee was being brewed with scientific precision. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed and exhaled. Day 1. Time to be the girl who belonged here. Patrick met her in the hallway with a clipboard and a smile that was slightly too bright for the hour. "Good morning, Miss Carter. Mr. Whitaker's morning routine begins at 6:15. He expects you to observe today." Blair. "You're not to speak unless spoken to. Don't offer suggestions, and never, under any circumstances, touch him." For blinked. "I didn't realize touch was part of the job." "It's not. That's the point." He led her to the kitchen, where Graham was slicing exactly 4 pieces of papaya. White granite counters, not a single item out of place. He didn't look up. "Morning," Jinxie said softly. 3 minutes and 42 seconds late, he replied, still slicing. "But it's your first day. I won't document it." He gestured to the small black binder on the counter. Her name was on the label. She stepped closer and caught the time. Carter J. Proximity file, week 1. "You're keeping a performance file? You're living in my house. And we don't have the luxury of improvisation." She folded her arms. "God forbid something happen that isn't..." His gaze lifted, cool and sharp. "You think that's funny?" "I think it's sad." He didn't flinch, just returned to his fruit. Wanted to ask what happened to him. Why everything in his world was measured, filtered, labeled. Instead, she watched as he lined up his vitamins by color, then took them with exactly 8 ounces of water. "Tell me something," she said finally. He looked at her. "Is there a rule about smiling in this house?" "Nah." "Good, because I think you could use one." They spent the morning walking through his schedule. Breakfast at 6:30, emails at 7, video call with European board members at 8:15. Jinxie sat in the corner of his office with a notepad, feeling increasingly like a well-paid ghost. At 11:45, Patrick entered with lunch. Everything was white. White steamed fish, white rice, clear broth. Jinxie looked at her own plate, a tray of multigrain crackers and unsweetened green tea. "What is this?" she whispered. "Mr. Whitaker's gut is sensitive," Patrick replied. "Is his soul allergic to joy, too?" Patrick choked back a laugh. Graham glanced up. "Something funny?" "Nothing," Patrick said. "Just tea." The day dragged on. By the time dinner came and went, Jinxie was exhausted, not from activity, but from the silence. He never raised his voice. He never touched a thing without wiping it twice. And every clock in the house was perfectly synchronized, ticking together, ticking like a warning. That night, she knocked on his office door. He looked up. I just wanted to check if there's anything else you need before I go to bed." He studied her. "You can't sleep before 10 p.m. "Says who?" "The contract." She rolled her eyes. "Of course." She turned to leave, then paused. "You know, most people build walls to keep others out. You built an entire city. I prefer to call it infrastructure. You really don't let anyone in, do you?" He didn't answer. She walked away. 2:13 IOM. Jinxie jolted awake to the sound of glass shattering. She ran barefoot into the hallway and found the kitchen light on. Graham was on the floor, a broken glass near his hand, water spreading across the tiles. "Graham?" He flinched. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Don't touch me," he snapped, and froze. "I'm fine," he added, quieter. "You're bleeding." I said I'm fine. But his hand was shaking, and there was a thin line of red on his palm. Jinxie slowly crouched, reaching for a towel. He pulled away. And she paused. "I'm not going to hurt you. It's not about that." She didn't move. "Then what is it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the cut like it was a math problem he couldn't solve. "May I?" she asked. He hesitated, then barely nodded. She moved carefully, dabbing at his palm. For a long moment, he just watched her. His breath came faster and slower. The panic that had filled his chest began to ease. Her touch was light, careful, familiar. "I thought you didn't let people touch you," she said softly. "I don't. Or I just did." He stared at her. "I'll clean this up," she said, rising. "You should sit down." Later, after the kitchen was quiet again, Graham sat alone at the counter. He looked at the towels she'd left behind. But she didn't follow any of them. And for the first time in 30 years, he didn't mind. The next morning, a phone call from Grandma Ruth cracked the silence. "I'm looking forward to seeing my sweet girl this Friday," she chirped. She sounded lovely. "She is," Graham said before he could stop himself. "Does she make you smile?" He didn't answer. "Shushi," Grandma said, using his childhood nickname. "Life's too short to feel nothing. I don't care if it's pretend. I just want to see you care." He hung up the call and turned toward the guest room. The door was closed, but he could hear her humming softly to herself, something off-key and hopeful. And for the first time in years, Graham Whitaker realized he didn't want her to stop. Chapter 4: Soup and Secrets. The car ride to Evanston was quiet. Not tense, not awkward. Just careful. Graham drove himself, hands fixed at 10 and 2, eyes on the road like the lines might vanish if he blinked. Jinxie sat beside him, dress carefully chosen from the rack Margaret had labeled sweet but presentable. No perfume, no earrings, just a cream sweater, and she practiced smiling in the mirror that morning, rehearsed answers to imaginary grandmother questions, and mentally counted the amount of time she'd have to stay in character. Then she remembered what Anya had told her. Grandmothers always know. And now here she was, 27 minutes into the ride, fighting back nausea and trying to look like someone who belonged in his world. "You okay?" Graham asked, breaking the silence. She nodded. "Fine." "You're gripping your bag like it's about to run away." "I always do that when I'm nervous." He glanced at her. "You don't seem like the nervous type. You don't seem like the, I'll pay someone 50 grand to fake date me type either." "Duh. Touché." He didn't laugh, but his lips twitched slightly. A reaction? She counted it as a win. Grandma Ruth lived in a storybook. That's what Jinxie thought as they pulled up the gravel driveway lined. The house was white clapboard with green shutters, a wide front porch, and a dog asleep on the steps who didn't even stir when the car stopped. The front door opened before they rang the bell. Grandma Ruth stood there in a floral apron, both arms wide, grin blinding. "Well, butter my biscuits," she called. "You must be Jinxie." Jinxie smiled, already a little charmed. "Yes, ma'am." "None of that ma'am business. I'm Grandma Ruth, and you are adorable. Come in, let me get a look at you." She hugged Jinxie tightly, so tightly in fact that Jinxie caught Graham flinch from 5 feet away. Grandma didn't notice, or maybe she did and didn't care. "You smell like sunshine and reason," Grandma declared. Finally, a girl who doesn't marinate in department store perfume. Jinxie laughed. Graham stepped in quietly behind them. I told you she was different. But you say that about your finance reports too, Grandma said. This is better. The house smelled like rosemary, chicken stock, and years of kindness. They sat at a table covered in mismatched china and linen napkins faded from love, not neglect. A pot of soup steamed in the center, deep red, herby, suspiciously rich. Jinxie leaned in to sniff. What's in it? Grandma winked. Old family recipe. We call it get married soup. Graham stiffened. Jinxie laughed. Is it cursed? Better, Grandma said. It's spiced. That soup's brought more couples together than late-night wine and thunderstorms. Graham cleared his throat. Grandma? Oh hush, Shishi. You think I don't know how long it's been since you touched someone willingly? He coughed. Jinxie grinned into her napkin. Dinner was warm. Unreal. Somewhere between spoonfuls of soup and stories about Graham's childhood goat herding phase. He was 6, and the goat won, Grandma said. Jinxie forgot to act. She laughed freely, leaned forward when Grandma spoke, touched Graham's sleeve when he said something surprisingly dry and funny. And he didn't flinch. He didn't recoil. He just looked at her, quiet, studying, like she was a language he thought he'd forgotten and was relearning syllable by syllable. After dessert, lemon pie, Grandma sat back with a sigh. You know, she said, if I were 20 years younger, I'd worry about you stealing him from me. Jinxie laughed, but Graham went still. Grandma, he began. But she held up a hand. No, I know it's early. I'm just saying. You look right. You sit like puzzle pieces. Jinxie's throat caught. The puzzle pieces. She was the wrong fit. A counterfeit. A fraud wrapped in soft sweaters and borrowed shoes. But for a second, she wanted to believe it. Later, while Grandma cleaned the kitchen with a force only Southern women in floral aprons can muster, Graham walked her to the guest room. He hesitated at the door. She likes you, he said. She likes everyone. It's her superpower. She didn't like anyone I dated before. You dated people. He raised a brow. Once, in college. It lasted 4 days. Intense. She broke up with me because I asked her to alphabetize her makeup drawer. Jinxie smiled. I'd have married you for that.
His gaze softened, then grew quiet again. She asked if we were sleeping in the same room. Jinxie blinked. Are we? No. You take the guest room. I'll sleep on the sofa. You'll notice. You'll notice if I fall into a stress-induced coma, too. She nodded. Fair. He handed her a key. If you need anything, I will. He turned, then paused. I didn't hate tonight, he said. She looked at him. I didn't either. And then he did something he never did. He reached out. Not a hug, not a touch, just a gesture, like he was going to hold her arm, but he stopped inches away. That was enough. 111 IMing. Lindsay woke to soft creaking, then the sound of footsteps. She stepped out into the hallway and found Graham sitting on the floor of the den, blanket draped over his shoulders, staring at an old photo album in his lap. She didn't speak, just sat beside him. He didn't flinch. He didn't move away. They looked at the photos, his first birthday, summer picnics, a blurry snapshot of him in a bow tie beside a tiny girl with curly dark hair. She was the neighbor's granddaughter, he murmured. We were inseparable for 2 summers. She gave me a paper flower, said it would never wilt. Jinxie's breath hitched. Do you still have it? She moved away, he said. I don't remember her name, but I remember her touch. Silence. She was the last person I touched without reacting. Jinxie's hand rested beside his on the carpet. Not touching, just there. Close enough. That night, he didn't ask her to leave. And she didn't offer?
Chapter 5. The Woman in the Elevator. Monday morning came too fast, with city wind and too little sleep. Jinxie stood in the penthouse foyer, wearing a gray silk blouse and dark jeans. Not fancy, but somehow still not her. She smoothed her hair, trying to forget the night before. The quiet moment on the den floor, the warmth of sitting close to someone who didn't flinch. The way Graham had looked at her without speaking, as if trying to solve a riddle she didn't even know she was part of. By the time the elevator doors opened, she was composed. Almost. Graham was already inside. But she stepped in. Their eyes met in the reflection, first clean, neutral, unreadable. But then his voice, low and dry. Running late? Pick said 7:15. It's 7:17. I know, she said flatly. 2 whole minutes. I'm probably fired. He didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth tugged up, just slightly. The elevator doors slid closed. The descent began in silence. Floor 59, 58, 57. Then the elevator jolted. A flicker of light overhead, a mechanical groan, then gentleness. Did the elevator just stop? Jinxie asked. Graham pressed the emergency call button. No. She looked at him. Is this normal? She nodded. Okay, cool. Trapped. That's fine. He checked the control panel again, calm as ever. System reboot, most likely. It'll resume in a few minutes. But she noticed the way his fingers clenched behind his back. She noticed everything now. You're claustrophobic? Aye. Low. You're lying. He didn't deny it. She stepped closer. Okay, well, this is just a box, and we're in it. But we're not dying in it. You're still the CEO of the tallest building in Chicago. You can probably buy the elevator company if this thing doesn't start moving. His chest rose and fell, faster now. You need distraction, she said softly. I don't need. So, let's talk, she said, cutting him off. Let's talk about your weird obsession with even numbers. His brow furrowed. Why? Why even numbers? Did odd ones bully you in childhood? He looked at her, eyes sharp but not angry. Curious. I like symmetry, he finally said. Control. You can't control everything. You'd be surprised. You'd be exhausted, she replied. And something broke in him, just a little. A breath that sounded like laughter. Then, movement. The elevator jerked, then resumed its descent like nothing had happened. But Graham wasn't the same. He was still watching her. Like maybe the distraction had worked. When the doors opened onto the Whitaker Group lobby, Jinxie stepped out first. She wasn't thinking about the press, or the staff, or the fact that her hand had briefly brushed his shoulder when the lights flickered. But everyone else was. Eyes turned, heads whispered, phones hovered just shy of camera ready. Graham stepped out behind her, calm, composed, until Patrick appeared, looking pale. Sir, you're needed upstairs. Emergency call with Berlin. Graham nodded. Have her meet me there. And Patrick blinked. Have who? Graham looked at Jinxie. My fiancé. Patrick didn't miss a beat. Of course. And then Graham was gone, swept into his empire like a wave swallowing a stone. But Jinxie remained, still catching stares she didn't know how to read. And she didn't like being visible. Not like this. She used to walk through the world unnoticed. Now, everyone wanted to know the girl the CEO touched. Back upstairs, Patrick found her outside Graham's office. You handled that well, he said. Most people freeze under that kind of attention. I've had worse, Jinxie replied. He studied her. You know, he hasn't smiled like that since... ever. She glanced at the office door. He didn't smile? We almost did. That's like fireworks from him. She didn't respond. Patrick lowered his voice. I know it's fake. I know it's all pretend. But sometimes, pretend starts to feel like something else. She looked away. "We don't worry," he said. "I won't say anything." Jinxie nodded, throat tight. It wasn't what Patrick said that scared her. It was that he was right. That evening, she wandered back into the penthouse to find Graham at the window again, staring out at Lake Michigan. He spoke first. "Thank you." She paused. "For what?" "Distracting me." "In the elevator?" "You mean for talking nonsense while you had a mini panic attack?" He turned. "For not pretending I didn't." Silence. She walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water. Got one near him. He didn't touch it. "You're not afraid of elevators," she said. Olivia nodded. "You're afraid of what happens when the walls close in." He met her eyes. "You're afraid of not having control." Still, no reply. So she whispered, "What happened to you, Graham?" He looked at her. Not with resistance, with grief. And she knew. Whatever it wasn't simple. It wasn't old. It was inside him still, like a buried wire humming under glass. Later that night, she sat in her room, notebook in hand. Fools. We're falling into a lie on page 2. Do not look at him when he's vulnerable. Do not wonder who broke him. Do not wish it had been you who made him whole. She closed the notebook. And somewhere, beyond the walls of her borrowed bedroom, Graham sat in the dark, remembering what it felt like to breathe in a space with no air. And realizing that, somehow, she had become the only oxygen he trusted. Chapter 6. The Wedding That Wasn't. The problem with pretending is that sometimes the world believes you before you're ready to believe it yourself. That thought sat heavy in Jinxie's chest as she stood in front of a mirror, wearing a bridal gown she hadn't picked, under lights she didn't ask for, beside a man she couldn't stop thinking about. "Hold still, sweetheart," the stylist said, adjusting the veil. "This one's a stunner." Jinxie looked at herself. The dress was blush white satin, fitted at the waist like a secret she couldn't keep. She didn't look like herself. She looked like the version of a woman someone like Graham Whitaker was supposed to love. And beside her, in the corner of the studio, Graham stood stiff in a black tailored suit, arms folded, expression unreadable. The photographer clapped. "All right, lovebirds, let's try something more intimate for this next set." Jinxie stepped closer automatically. Graham didn't move. "Arms around her waist, sir," the photographer coached. "That's right. Pull her in a little. You're engaged. Let us feel it." His hands hesitated, hovered, then settled lightly at her waist. Her breath hitched, not because it hurt. Because it didn't, Olivia ran. He was touching her, barely, but no hives, no trembling, just warmth. And something slower, softer, starting to build. "You okay?" she whispered. He didn't look at her. "I don't know." Click, flash. The photographer circled them like a shark. He leaned in, closer, almost a kiss. "Beautiful? Hold that." They froze. His mouth near hers, closer than ever. Her heartbeat thundered. And she could see the green flecks in his gray eyes, could feel the moment stretch like a string about to snap. "Closer," the photographer murmured. "Kiss her like you mean it." Jinxie's lips parted. Graham didn't move. Not away, not closer. The air went still. And then he whispered, low enough only she could hear. "Would it ruin everything if I did?" I couldn't speak. It's not when her heart was already answering. The click of the shutter broke the moment. The photographer moved on. Jinxie stepped back. Barely, but it felt like miles. The next few poses were stiff, distant, formal. By the end of the session, she was back in her street clothes, sweater zipped, heart buried deep. They didn't speak in the car. They didn't even look at each other. Not until he pulled over at a cafe downtown and said quietly, "Do you want to sit for a minute?" She nodded. They ordered coffee and sat outside, under the awning, watching the street bustle around them. "Ha!" Jinxie said, finally. How do I do? Convincing fiancé? You were perfect, Graham said. His voice didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded tired, like perfection wasn't what he wanted anymore. You didn't kiss me, she said. Lie. He stirred his coffee. Because if I kissed you, he said, it wouldn't be acting. Silence. A car horn blared in the distance. A pigeon landed too close and then flew off. I think I'm starting to forget what's part of the contract, she whispered. He looked at her then. I remember, he said, but I wish I didn't. That night, Grandma Ruth called during dinner. I saw the photos, she beamed through the screen. You two looked like a cover of Southern Brides magazine. Jinxie smiled. Graham didn't. You okay, baby? Grandma asked him. I'm fine, he replied. But he wasn't. Because when Jinxie had stood in that dress, something shifted. Something broke through his careful walls. And now every part of him that used to hide behind rules and precision was asking questions he couldn't answer. Like, what if this isn't pretend anymore? Later that night, as Jinxie folded laundry in the guest room, she found the dress tag still tucked into the side seam. Price $12,800, 0 cents. He laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of wearing something worth more than her mother's medical bill made her want to cry. She reached for her notebook. Rules for falling into a lie? Page 3. Don't let a suit make you forget who you are. Don't memorize his smile. Don't ask what he would have said if the photographer hadn't interrupted. She stared at the last line for a long time. Then slowly, beneath it, she wrote, Don't kiss him. Because if you do, you'll never be able to lie again. The girl behind the name. The morning after the photo shoot, everything felt too loud. The coffee machine, the clinking of utensils, even the sound of Graham flipping pages in the Wall Street Journal. Jinxie sat at the breakfast bar, trying to act like nothing had changed, like her heart hadn't almost leapt out of her chest when he whispered, Would it ruin everything if I did? Grandma's going to want to see us again this weekend, Graham said without looking up. Jinxie nodded, stirring her oatmeal. I figured. And she loved the pictures. Great. Vincent. He turned a page. You have a fitting at noon. My wife, what? An event next week. The Founders Gala. She blinked. You mean the one with Forbes and that magazine that only features people who own islands? That's the one. I don't belong there. He glanced at her now. You didn't belong in a wedding dress either, and yet, that should have stung. Instead, it warmed her in a way that made her skin itch. I'll be ready, she said. Margaret met her at the entrance of Whitaker Department, 4 stories of luxury and intimidation. You're late, the stylist said, ushering her inside. We've got fittings, shoes, hair previews, and a quick etiquette refresher. You'll be standing next to the mayor's wife and a tech billionaire's girlfriend. Can't have you chewing gum and calling people dude. Jinxie smirked. Noted. Inside the private dressing lounge, Margaret handed her a gown. Try this first. It was emerald green, backless, shaped like a promise, and stitched like a secret. Jinxie changed behind the curtain, staring at herself in the mirror. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. 10 minutes later, she stepped into the main showroom. The sales clerk looked up, startled. Oh, you're... She paused. You're the Carter girl. Jinxie froze. Excuse me? You're the fiancé, right, of Graham Whitaker? Margaret told us your name was... Oh gosh, not Jinxie. Something else. Jinxie's throat tightened. What did she say? I think she said Jacqueline? No. Juniper? Wait, no. Jessica? Margaret emerged, waving it off. Ignore her. She mixes names all the time. But Jinxie's heart was already hammering. Back at the penthouse, she found Graham on the rooftop garden, rarely used, mostly for show. But he stood there, tie loosened, staring at the skyline like he was waiting for the city to answer a question he hadn't dared to ask. "I need to talk to you," she said. He turned, saw her face, straightened. "Why is it?" She walked toward him, crossing the space like it might collapse under her feet. "What name did you give Patrick when you started this whole fiancé thing?" He hesitated. "Jinxie Carter." "Don't lie." He looked at her. Quietly, "Jessica Carter." Her eyes stung. "That's my sister." "I know. You knew I wasn't her from the beginning?" He nodded. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because when you walked in that day, soaked, furious, unprepared, you were the first person in years who didn't treat me like a product or a paycheck." She stepped back. "So you lied to me about my own name?" "I didn't lie," he said. "I let you lie, and I let myself believe that maybe the truth didn't matter." "Why, it does," she said. "It matters." Silence stretched between them. Wind ruffled her hair. A storm was coming. "You used me," she said, voice cracking. "Just like I used you." "No," he whispered. "I saw you, and I liked you, not the name, not the lie, you." Her fists clenched. "Then why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want to lose what we were pretending to be." It shattered her. Because it wasn't pretend anymore. She walked away. Didn't cry until she reached her room. Didn't scream until the door was locked. And when she opened her notebook, her hands were shaking. Fools. For falling into a lie? Page 4. Don't forget your own name. Don't forget his silence is not the same as safety. Don't let a man fall for a version of you that never existed. She stared at the final rule for a long time. Then turned the page. Don't fall for a man who already saw the real you and stayed silent anyway. That night, Graham stood outside her door. He didn't knock. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, hand raised, then lowered, and walked away. Chapter 8. The day they finally said it. The night air was thick with summer. A storm hadn't arrived, but the sky held its breath like it was deciding whether to cry. Jinxie stood on the rooftop of the Whitaker penthouse, barefoot, her sweater too thin, but she already filled the cold. She didn't feel much of anything. Not after the week they'd just had. After the reveal. After the name. After the silence. She had packed twice and unpacked twice. And now she stood under a city sky, trying to figure out how to say goodbye to a man who had never quite said hello. I lied to you, Graham said softly behind her. She didn't turn. I knew who you were the second I saw you. Still, she said nothing. I should have told you the truth the night we signed the contract. I should have said I didn't care what name was on your ID. I should have said I didn't care if you were the girl I hired or the one I never meant to find. She let the silence stretch. He stepped beside her. I didn't say any of that, because I don't know how to want something and not destroy it. That caught her. She looked at him now, really looked. He wasn't put together tonight. No tie, no watch, no perfect, just Graham, with a storm in his eyes. I was afraid, he said. I was, she whispered. A long beat passed. You remember, she said, that day in the elevator when you panicked and I wouldn't stop talking? He nodded. I did that because I knew what it felt like, to have the walls close in. He met her eyes. I feel like the space you're standing in might disappear beneath you if someone stops pretending. He stepped closer. Are we pretending now? She swallowed. I don't want to anymore. Neither did he. They stood there for a long time. And finally, he touched her. Not out of obligation. Not because someone asked, but because he wanted to. His fingers brushed hers, uncertain, then certain. And when she didn't pull away, he exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath for 3 decades. Later that night, they sat in his study, wrapped in quiet. No contracts, no cameras, just 2 people finally too tired to hide. Jinxie curled on the couch, hair down, face bare. Graham stood by the fireplace, nursing a glass of water like it was whiskey. "You said you didn't care who I was," she murmured. "I meant it. Even now?" He turned to her. "Especially now." The tablet on his desk lit up, a call from Grandma Ruth. He smiled faintly. She always knows. He answered, "Hi, Grandma." Jinxie leaned into the frame without hesitation. Grandma gasped, "You're together?" "We are." "I'm not dying, you know," she said. "You didn't have to rush." "We know." "You sure you know what you're doing?" she asked, softer now. Jinxie looked at Graham. He nodded. "We finally said it." "Good," Grandma said, eyes twinkling. "Because I've been waiting for you to stop playing house and start building one." After the call, Graham sat beside her. She turned to him. "You said it," she whispered. "I did." "Say it again." "I love you." She smiled, then cried. Because for once, it was real. Chapter 9. The Claws She Tore Apart. The next morning, Jinxie stood at the kitchen island, holding the contract that had started it all. She had found it in Graham's study drawer. It's right where it had always been. Clean, cold, untouched, like a museum piece of their lie. She flipped to the last page and found it, buried beneath terms and bonuses and signatures. Clause 47B. In the event Party A chooses to terminate this agreement due to emotional or personal entanglements, Party B is required to withdraw from co-residence within 72 hours without objection or delay. Clause for clean exits. A clause written by a man who never planned to stay. And now? Now it was everything she no longer believed in. She grabbed a pen and drew a single, sharp line through it. He found her outside on the penthouse balcony, contract in hand, hair caught in the morning breeze. "You wrote this to protect yourself," she said without turning. "To give yourself an escape." "I needed it then." She turned now, held up the page. "Do you still?" He met her eyes. And she tore it in half. The sound cut through the air like thunder. And just like that, what was fake was no longer protected. Later, in the Whitaker Group boardroom, Graham stood at the head of. Jinxie sat beside him. The board was silent. He had called them all here without warning. Patrick looked nervous. The CFO looked annoyed. Graham was calm. "I'm withdrawing from the strategic merger with Blackwater Industries," he said plainly. Gasps, mutters, a flurry of protest. "Deal's worth $250 million. And he cleared legal. This reckless." He raised a hand. "I'm not reckless. I'm redirecting." "What?" someone asked. He looked at Jinxie, and then back to the board. "Gee, what matters?" After the meeting, Jinxie followed him to the rooftop garden. "Are you sure?" she asked. "The deal was everything." He nodded. "So was the old me." She smiled. "And who's the new you?" He stepped close, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "The man who wants to build something that doesn't collapse when someone touches it." She laughed softly. "Even numbers and all?" He held up 2 fingers. "Even numbers forever." Then paused. "I am, well, a one-armed woman. I used to think the only thing I wanted was to survive." "I know. Now we want to be chosen, not bought, not borrowed, not needed." "Chosen," he whispered. "I choose you," she said. And when he kissed her, it wasn't contractual. It wasn't careful. It was everything the clause never could have written. That night, she opened her notebook one last time. Rules for falling into a lie. Final page. If you're lucky, the lie becomes the truest thing you've ever known. And she tore out the page and tucked it in his pocket while he slept. Chapter 10. The Even Number. Graham stood outside his grandmother's porch, suit jacket in hand, pacing the way a man does when his certainty finally makes room for feeling. Inside, Grandma Ruth was setting the table. 2 teacups. Even numbers. Jinxie laughed when she saw it. You train him well, she told Grandma. Baby, he was always waiting for someone to make sense of his math. Later that afternoon, Graham took her hand in the garden. No cameras, no stylists, no champagne towers. Just her, barefoot in the grass in a white sundress that didn't try too hard. He knelt, but not with a ring. With a folded paper. Her contract. And the one she'd torn apart. Grandma asked if we were still planning a ceremony, he said. Jinxie raised an eyebrow. Still pretending? No more alone, he whispered. Just finally honest. He unfolded the paper. Inside, in his precise handwriting, was a single line. Will you marry me? For real, without clause or condition. She laughed through tears. I've already chosen you, she whispered. He smiled. I know, but I needed to ask. Even numbers and all. 2 days later, on the rooftop of the Whitaker building, under strings of soft light and the blush of a summer sky, they stood before a handful of people who mattered. Patrick cried. Grandma wore pearls. The officiant asked if there were vows. Jinxie nodded. She looked at Graham. I came here pretending to be someone else, she said. But somehow, you saw me anyway. You saw the part of me I forgot how to be. Soft, scared, hopeful. You taught me that control isn't strength and touch isn't weakness. That love doesn't have to be loud to be real. Graham's voice trembled as he spoke. You were chaos, he said. You were color. You were every odd number I tried to avoid, and you broke me. Beautifully. I used to need rules. Now I just need you. They kissed as the sun dipped below the skyline. The applause was soft, but the feeling was undeniable, even measured, forever. That night, in their room, Jinxie whispered, You didn't even flinch when I touched you. He pulled her close. I never will again, the quietest kind of forever. There are stories that shout, and then there are stories that whisper. Softly, steadily, until the only thing louder than silence is love. Graham Whitaker used to count everything. Calories, minutes, mistakes. He built a world so precise, nothing could hurt him. And Jinxie Carter. And she stopped counting long ago. Too many losses, too many nights where rent, grief, and guilt all arrived in the same envelope. But then, the wrong elevator. A contract neither believed in. A kiss that never happened, but changed everything. Because what they learned, standing beside each other in all that pretending, was this. Sometimes the lie breaks first. But what's left after is more honest than anything you dared to wish for. He stopped flinching. She stopped hiding. And the walls that once kept them safe become the home they chose to build. No performance, no conditions, just 2 even numbers, finally together. Maybe you've been the one who loved first. Maybe you've been the one afraid to be touched. Or maybe you've been both. But if this story found your heart tonight, here's what I hope you carry with you. You are not too late for love that knows your name. You are not too much for someone who sees your scars and stays anyway. And you are not foolish for wanting something real in a world full of conditions. Real love doesn't keep score. It shows up. It learns your rhythms. It waits for you at the elevator door. If you've ever been afraid to be seen, if you've ever loved someone who couldn't say it back, or if you've ever hoped quietly, deeply, for someone who chooses you on purpose, tell us below. Your story matters here. You never know who you'll heal by sharing it.